Good morning, Olive, Arlo, and Frank. It's your grandpa. This morning I'm going to read Scrambled Egg Super by Dr. Seuss. This book came out in 1953, the year that I was born, so it's 70, 71 years old, depending on when it came out. And I don't know what that thing is, but it's a boy riding on it, and there's a bird looking at them. And here's the title page. It says the same thing up here. Scrambled Egg Super by Dr. Seuss. I don't like to brag, and I don't like to boast, said Peter T. Hooper. But speaking of toast, and speaking of kitchens and ketchup and cake, and kettles and stoves, and the stuff people bake, and I love to bake. I like to make bread, other things too, but bread for the most part is my not that I'm that good, but I love doing it. Well, I don't like to brag, but I'm telling you, Liz, that speaking of cooks, I'm the best that there is. Now, I like to cook also, but I'm not the best that there is. If you don't believe me, just ask your grandmother. Don't tell her I said that. Why, only last Tuesday, when Mother was out, I really cooked something worth talking about. And I bet it has something to do with eggs. So we see that here's Peter and Liz and the cat, and they're in the kitchen. She must be younger because she's smaller and she's sitting on a stool looking at him and listening to him, and he's bragging away. Peter T. Hooper. You see, I was sitting here resting my legs, and I happened to pick up a couple of eggs. And I sort of got thinking, it's sort of a shame that scrambled eggs always taste the same. And that's because ever since goodness knows when, they've always been made from the eggs of a hen. And that's only partially true. Some people occasionally make duck eggs, and then there's these birds called quail. They're small birds, so they have these little tiny eggs, and they're called quail eggs. But you'd have to cook like a dozen quail eggs to make one omelet. Just a plain common hen. What a dumb thing to use with all of the other fine eggs you could use. And so that's probably the egg of a hen. And if you go in your refrigerator, what you see in there is going to be the eggs of hens. And so I decided that just for a change, I'd scramble a new kind of egg on the range. Some fine, fancy eggs that no other cook cooks. Take the eggs of the ruffle-necked salmon-magooks. The salmon-magooks say that should be good. So I went out and found some as quick as I could. So this is what a salmon-magooks looks like. And those eggs are orange. orange to match Mrs. Salmon McGooks's orange eyelids, I should say. I said eyelid because they're only the top on her present. But she does have one on each side, so it's eyelids. And while I was lugging them back to the house, I happened to notice a tizzle-topped grouse in a tree down the street. And I knew from her looks that her egg and the egg of the Salamagooks ought to mix mighty well, ought to taste simply super when scrambled together by Peter T. Hooper. So here he is, and he's got the gook's eggs, and he's looking up at the tree with the grouse. And a grouse is a real bird. I never heard of the Salamagooks. I think that's a made-up bird. I don't think a grouse really looks like that, though. So I took those eggs home and I frizzled them up, and I added some sugar, 2/3 of a cup. That's a lot of sugar. Your moms would not be real happy about you guys eating that much sugar. Frank, you get away with it. You're not at home anymore. And a small pinch of pepper, and also a pound of horseradish sauce was sitting around. That's an awful lot of horseradish sauce. And they don't measure horseradish in pounds. Horseradish roots, yes, but the sauce, no. And also some nuts. Then I tasted this stuff, and it tasted quite fine, but not fine enough. So here he is, and he's got the pan going, and he's mixing stuff up with an egg beater. People don't really use egg beaters anymore, but when I was a kid, people would use them in the kitchen. Yeah, of course, it's not going to be in focus now. Salmon McGooks and grouse egg. Horseradish sauce mixed in. To make the best scramble that's ever been made, the cook has to hook the best eggs ever laid. So I drove to the country, quite rather far out, and I studied the birds that were flirting about. I looked with great care at a mop-noodled finch, and there really is a bird called a finch. I looked at a beagle-beaked, bald-headed Grinch. I don't think there's one of them. And also I looked at a shade roosting quail, and we discussed there's a such thing as a quail, who was roosting right under a lassalax tail. Not a real bird. And I looked at a spritz, never heard of that, and a flannel-winged jay. There are blue jays. But I just didn't stop. I kept right on my way, because they didn't have eggs. They weren't laying that day. So I'm not going to try to figure out which one of these birds is which, but here's all the birds he's talking about. And he's going up the side of a mountain on his bicycle. That would be quite a climb on a bike. That's almost a 45-degree angle, and he's getting ready to go almost straight up and down, almost 90 degrees. Probably like 80, 75 degrees, that angle there. I don't know if that's physically possible. Then suddenly, boy, up that hill a short space, birds, they were laying all over the place. great happy gay families with uncles and cousins, all laying fine, strictly fresh eggs by the dozens. Why, I'd have a scramble more super than super, scrambled eggs, superty duperty booper, special deluxe a la Peter T. Hooper. And so here, see him at the bottom, and he's got some eggs already, and he's looking at all these birds all over the place. And he calls it a hill, but it looked like a mountain. But he gets to the top, and this is what he sees, all these weird looking birds. I picked out the eggs in a most careful way. I only picked those that I knew were grade A, and that's the the eggs that you sell in a store are grade A eggs. I only took eggs from the very best fowls, and fowls are birds. So I didn't take eggs from the twiddler owls, because I knew that the eggs of those fellas who twiddle taste sort of like dust from inside a bass fiddle. So that's them, that's the twiddling owls. We have owls all over our house because your grandmother's nickname is Brown Owl. That's her email address and stuff like that. I went for the kind that were mellow and sweet, and the world's sweetest eggs are the eggs of the queet. Never heard of that bird. Which is due to those very sweet trout which they eat. And those trout, well, they're sweet because they only eat wogs, and the wogs, after all, are the world's sweetest frogs. And the reason they're sweet is whenever they lunch, it's always the world's sweetest bees that they munch. And the reason no bees can be sweeter than these, they only eat blossoms of beezelnut trees. And these beezelnut blossoms are sweeter than sweet, and that's why I nabbed several eggs from the queet. And so here it shows this whole ecological cycle here where the bird's eating the fish, and the fish is eating the frog, and the frog's eating the bees, and the bees just eat that one kind of flower. Oh, and there's the boy over there in the corner looking at the whole scene. But I passed up the eggs of a bird called a strudel, who's sort of a stork, but with fur like a poodle. So this strudel, which isn't a real bird, is kind of like a stork, which is a real bird. And they have these long legs. In mythology, they were the bird that delivered babies to families. So when when your family's going to have a baby, people say, "Oh, the stork's going to visit you." And a poodle, of course, is a dog with like curly fur, hair, whatever you want to call it. For they say that the eggs of this kind of a stork are gooey like glue, and they stick to your fork. And the yolks of these eggs, I am told, taste like fleece, while the whites taste like very old bicycle grease. This kid really knows a lot about eggs. He's like an egg Einstein. There's that bird. the strudel. The places I hiked to, the roads that I rambled to find the best eggs that have ever been scrambled. I hunted new birds along wild, tangled trails, through gullies and gulches, down dingles and dales. Gullies and gulches are real things, but dingles and dales, well, there's hills and dales, but dingles, no. I wriggled my way and I crawled at a creep through a forest of ferns that was 40 miles deep. This kid has an active imagination. And I mushed through the brush till I found a fine quigger whose eggs are as big as a pinhead, no bigger. And a pinhead is just really like the head of a pin, really, really tiny. So there he is, and he's looking up. See him up? See him down there? Looking up at the quigger. Then I went for the eggs of a long-legged quong. That's not a real bird. Now this quong, well, she's built just a little bit wrong, for her legs are so terribly, terribly long that she has to lay eggs 20 feet in the air, and they drop with a plop to the ground from up there. So unless you can catch them before the eggs crash, you haven't got eggs. You've got long-legged hash. So this would never work, because how would they reproduce? Because little chickens or little birds come out of those eggs. The yolk of the egg is the embryo of the baby bird. So the mother sits on it, and it causes it to incubate, I guess, because they put them in an incubator, like keep it warm, and they grow. But we take the egg and then we do something to cause them to stop growing inside. So there's just that yolk inside. But this thing, they all break, and the baby bird's not going to survive without the shell. Eggs. I'd collected 302, but I still needed more, and I suddenly knew that the job was too big for one fellow to do. So I telegraphed north to some friends near Fazul, which is 10 miles or so just Fazol, which is 10 miles or so just beyond the North Pole. And then they all of them jumped in their catamasside, which is sort of a boat made of sea leopard's hide, which they sailed out to sea to go looking for grice, which is sort of a bird which lays eggs on the ice. And there are birds that lay eggs on the ice. They're penguins, which they grabbed with a tool which is known as a squitch, because those eggs are so cold to be touched without which. And so here are these guys, and so that quitch is like tongs. And here's the dudes in the boat down there. So now he's enlisted some help in his quest to make this super duper egg omelet. And while they were sending those eggs, I got word of a bird that does something that's almost unheard of. It's hard to believe, but this bird's called a pelf, and that's not a real bird. Lays eggs that are 3 times as big as herself. How that pelfer learned such a difficult trick, I never found out. But I found that egg quick. So look for a bird with an egg that's 3 times its size, and you'll find it. And I managed to get it down out of the nest and home to the kitchen along with the rest. Now, one of the chinks in the armor here of this kid's story is that birds don't just let you come up and take stuff out of their nest. They will very, very strenuously defend those eggs. That's their offspring. It's like a mom, a human mom, with her child. You're not going to let somebody come up and take you out of the stroller or something like that. Or come up to you and hang out with you on the playground. Some random adult comes strolling up. They're on high alert, those moms. So he's just going to go up there and take this thing. And look how little the kid is compared to the egg. Yeah, in real nature, this wouldn't go down well. The bird is actually bigger than the kid. But I didn't stop then, because I knew of some ducks by the name of the single-file Zumzian zucks, who stroll single file through the mountains of Zums, quite oddly enough, with their eggs on their thumbs. And some fellows in Zums, whom I happen to know, just happened to capture 1,000 or so. And they wrapped up their eggs and they mailed them by air, marked special delivery, handle with care. So here's this whole scene. And you see these birds go on and on and on. There's the guys down there. They have these eggs on their thumbs. Quite the imagination. I needed more helpers, and so for assistance I called up a fellow named Ali, long distance. And Ali, as soon as he hung up the phone, picked up a small basket and started alone, climbed the steep crags and the jags of Mount Struku to fetch me the eggs of a Mount Struku cuckoo. And there is an actual bird called a cuckoo bird. So they have these things called cuckoo clocks. And when it strikes the hour, they go cuckoo, cuckoo. And the little bird comes out of the top of the clock and makes that noise. But there's no Mount Struku cuckoo. Now these Mount Struku cuckoos are rather small gals. So here's this guy Ali, and so this is a depiction of an Arabic man, and in most places in the Arab world, you'll see people dressed a little bit like this, but this is a depiction of way back in the days gone by. So maybe this is Tunisia or something that it's representing. It doesn't say exactly. And there's a little bird. He's going up after it. But these Mount Struku cuckoos have lots of big pals. They dived from the skies with wild, cackling shrieks, and they jabbed at his legs. So this is what birds do. You're going to see here in a second. They go after him with wild, cackling shrieks, and they jabbed at his legs, and they stabbed at his cheeks with their yammering, clamoring, hammering beaks. But Ali, brave Ali, he fought his way through, and he sent me that egg, as I knew he would do. For my scrambled egg super-de-duper-de-booper, special deluxe a la Peter T. Hooper. So here's these birds chasing him. But poor Ali. Poor Ali. He does get the one egg, and you see he's got it in the basket. This bird's going after him. In the meanwhile, of course, I was keeping real busy collecting the eggs of the three eyelash tizzy. They're quite hard to reach, so I wrote on the top of a hammock-a schnim-ica schnam-ica schnap. A hammock-a shimmick-a shammick-a schnap. And so here's a hammock-a shimmick-a shammick-a shop right there. In case you ever wondered what a hammock-a shimmick-a shammick-a shop looks like. And he's riding on it. Then I found a great flock of southwest facing cranes, and I guess they've got something that's wrong with their brains. For this kind of crane, when she's guarding her nest, will always stand facing precisely southwest. So to get at those eggs wasn't hard in the least. I just came from behind, from precisely northeast. and cranes are real birds. Actually, they have cranes in this area here. So here they are. They're all facing the same way. And this is silly. But the whole book is silly. So there he goes. He just like goes up behind them and steals. He's got a whole boat full of eggs. And it's yellow water. I don't know what's up with that. There's one possible explanation, but we're not going to go down that road. And I captured the egg of a grickly gractus, who lays them up high in a prickly cactus. This is a weird, well, they're all weird looking birds in this. And there's the cactus up there. Up there. And the bird. And the boy's in the cactus. See him up there? And he's getting that thing. Then I went for some ziffs. They're exactly like zuffs, but the ziffs live on cliffs, and the zuffs live on bluffs. But cliffs and bluffs are kind of the same. A bluff is, I guess, sort of a kind of rounded cliff. And seeing how bluffs are exactly like cliffs, it's mighty hard telling the zuffs from the ziffs. But I know that the egg that I got from the bluffs, if it wasn't a ziffs from the cliffs, it was a zuffs. And he's using some sort of a helicopter that looks a lot like an airplane. And here they're saying, Dr. Seuss is saying that cliffs and bluffs are exactly the same, but they're not exactly. It's just a matter of something called semantics. Now I needed the egg of a moth-watching sneth, who's a bird who's so big she scares people to death. And it just watches moths, I guess. And this big awful bird, well, the reason they name her the moth-watching sneth is because that's how they tame her. She likes watching moths, sort of quiets her mind. And while she is watching, you sneak up behind and you yank at her egg. So I got one, of course, with the help of some friends and a very fast horse. So here, we see what's going on here. So this man down at the bottom lets go a moth, and the moth flies up here. Let's see if we can get this in focus. There we go. And almost like sitting on the egg, which is what the mother birds do. But these guys are tying a rope and using a horse, and they're going to pull it out. That's a big, big bird. I guess that would scare human beings. If you went to the park, you saw that. If you want to get eggs you can't buy at a store, you have to do things never thought of before. Why, to get at that egg of the one small doff, of one very small doff, we had to pry all of one mountaintop off. So this thing is in a mountain, you see. So they pry the top of the mountain off with this pry bar. There's a guy on a horse, and the boy's behind him, and he's directing all this nonsense. Because you can't pry a mountaintop off. Then I heard of some birds who lay eggs, if you please. Taste like the air in the holes in Swiss cheese. And they live in big Zanzibar trees. So I ordered a tree full. The job was immense, but I needed those eggs, and so hang the expense. So he doesn't care how much it costs. He's going to have this big tree brought in. And there's guys that kind of look medieval. Well, that have these medieval axes anyway. I guess they're lumberjacks. I'm a lumberjack and it's okay. I still needed one more, and I saved it for last. The egg of the frightful bombastic, I gasped. And bombastic is a word that means like over the top. And that bird is so mean, and that bird is so fast, that I had to escape. An agillicajast, a fleet-footed beast, who can run like a deer, but sort of looks different. You steered him by ear. So here's the bird going after the boy, and he's on this, whatever this thing's called, and it looks weird. And he's steering it by pulling on its ears with this kind of Rube Goldberg setup. So you might ask, Grandpa, what's a Rube Goldberg setup? Rube Goldberg was this man who made all these machines where, like, you'd take a marble and roll it down this thing and it would hit something, and that would trigger some kind of a fulcrum, and that would send another ball going another way, and it would like go through this entire machine. It could take minutes to go through it. All through with the searching, all through with the looking, I had all I needed, and now for the cooking. I rushed to the kitchen, the place where I'd stacked them. I rolled up my sleeve, I unpacked them and cracked them, so apparently his parents are away. And shucked them and chucked them in 99 pans, and then I mixed in some beans. I used 50 cans. Then I mixed in some ginger, 9 prunes and 3 figs, and parsley, quite sparsely, just 22 sprigs. And a sprig is a small, like, bunch of parsley. Like, not a bunch, but like one piece of the parsley plant. Then I added 6 cinnamon sticks and a clove, and my scramble was ready to go on the stove. Now there's a lot going on in this picture. Let's get the pots and pans going and the eggs. Eggs everywhere. And you know how they tasted? How do you think they tasted? What you thinking? You thinking they tasted amazing? Ew, crappy? They tasted just like, well, they tasted exactly. You think maybe they just tasted like normal eggs? Exactly just like scrambled eggs, super-de-duper-de-booper, special deluxe, a la Peter T. Hooper. And so this whole story was told in their imaginations while the girl's sitting there and the cat's also on the floor going, hey, what's up? All of you guys have 2 cats, and I think they're Maui and Moana, and all of you have Chuchi. And here we go with this once again. Riding that thing. Going after a bird. Hey, until next time, peace out. There go the balloons.